Boatworks Today is a viewer-supported show. To learn more on how you can get involved and watch extended ad-free versions of these videos, please visit our website, BoatworksToday.com, and click on the top of the heading where it says Support This Show. Thank you. So welcome back, everybody. I hope you're doing well. My name is Andy with Boatworks Today, and this week, well, we're going to try, well, it's already done. We're going to get this insert mounted. Check it out. So to get started, the first thing I want to do is get a little bit of the grinding and basically prep work out of the way. And, so here I'm just grinding around with the grinder, and I want to remove pretty much all of the, well, this is gel, or this is actually old paint. But if it were gel coat, you'd want to remove all of the paint and gel coat so that you're basically exposing bare fiberglass. Because eventually this is where I'm going to be, doing my tabbing of the insert and tying it in with the rest of the helm area. Now, technically, I could do this once the helm or the insert is in place. But doing it before that happens, it's one less thing that I have to worry about damaging or anything like that. So getting it done now, it's just going to make it a whole lot easier. Now, speaking of grinders, what I'm using here is a Festool RAS 115, which technically isn't a grinder. I think is what they actually call it, is a rotary sander. But it's variable speed. It's got pretty good dust control. So this is what I use for grinding, and I actually prefer this more so over using like a high-speed grinder, just primarily for the ability for the dust collection. Now, one thing that I was a little bit surprised about is Festool is typically known for being kind of a high-end price point. And this particular sander, for whatever reason, is actually about half of the cost of what I was anticipating. So it's really not all that expensive, and it works very, very well. And if you'd like to find a little bit more about this grinder or even this little 1-inch belt sander that I'm using here, I will have a link down below in the description to my Amazon store where you can check that out. So with this insert just loosely set in place, it isn't really a good fit. Well, at least not yet. So in order to fix that, I need to do a little bit of scribing and kind of get this along the bottom edge to fit down as best as I can along the sides of the hull as well as across this rib. Now, once I get a good fit along the bottom, I'm going to have to repeat the same process along the top. Now, if you remember from a couple of videos ago, this insert is going to have to kind of sneak in and behind that open cutout there. So I want it to be a good fit. I want it to be not too small, and it can't be too big either, otherwise it won't fit. So here, the bottom it's a decent fit. It's not perfect, and truth be told, I ended up scribing this one more time just to get it a little bit closer. So once we get the bottom established, now I'm going to switch back over and try and trim the top. Now, what I'm looking for here is basically to have about a 3/4 of an inch, maybe even a little bit less, 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch reveal that I'm going to be able to tuck back behind under this cutout lip. Now, once this top edge is marked, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do the cutout using an oscillating cutter, just like I used on the bottom. And I'm probably going to take care of that off camera because you saw me do the bottom and the top isn't going to be any different. And honestly, I suspect everybody kind of wants to get to the point where they're going to see how bad this thing is going to fight me trying to get it in place. So, cue the clown music. I just need like 1 more inch. Come on. So where I'm getting hung up is right here on this corner. So I think what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna come in, trim this part off
so that this this backer can kind of drop down into place. I don't want it sticking up quite that high. I mean, it doesn't need to come down much, but maybe a ½ an inch. So let me get that trimmed up.
Well, I think we got it.
Nice good fit along the bottom. It makes that little curve there, as well as same over here. Now I did have to anchor this side just because it was getting a little squirrely on me. So every time I tried to make an adjustment on one side, this part would lift and move out of position. So now along his back here, because going from side to side, there's a bit of a bow, you know, going out. So I think for tonight what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a just like a 1x4, something that's going to span from here over to here, and then I'll put some epoxy up along the top edge behind in here. But I'm going to hot glue a board all the way across to kind of straighten out that back panel, and then I think I'm going to be able to suck it in against the back side of here until the epoxy sets. Now as far as all along the tops here, along these undersides, I'm just going to have to pry these out a little bit and pump some epoxy up into here and just kind of, well, it's just going to have to be what it is. It'll still be anchored. Like I said, this is just a backer. This is not meant to be anything structural. That's all it is just to be a backer for laying in the tabbing and all the successive layers of fiberglass to build this thickness up. So, what am I doing next? So good morning. It is the following day, and so the epoxy has set up, and overall, I gotta say I'm happy with it. You know, it's not perfect, but it's good. A few things I need to do a little bit of trimming here and there, and then there's one area in particular, kind of, well, I'll show you here in a second, that I'm not quite sure why it turned out like this, but it's a little bit off. But I think it's gonna be a pretty simple fix. So now, just to give a little bit of reference, the area that I'm talking about is right along this back edge. It's not even. You can see, at least on this angle, you can see there's a little bit of a gap right in through here. But then as we go across, not so much. So for whatever reason, this corner just kind of bulged out a little bit. And that needs to get fixed because ultimately I want this, you know, the area that we just kind of snuck in place there yesterday, I want that to be coming down and landing on top of this rib. So I think that the fix I'm gonna try first is I'm just gonna take some hot glue and I'm gonna put in a couple of braces, you know, along this backside, and then I'm just gonna kind of push it in place, because the next thing I want to do is I want to come in and do some tabbing along this bottom, so that once I get the tabbing in place, then technically that should hold it where I want it, and then I can just keep on going forward with getting the rest of this glass laid up. So
So as you saw here, I'm using the 2-to-1 epoxy made by Totalboat. Now, could I have used polyester resin for this? Well, maybe, and by maybe I mean no, not at all. And the main reason for that being is that this form that I'm going to be tabbing in place here, this form was made using epoxy. So, it's not a good idea to try and put a polyester-based material on top of epoxy. Now, the other way around is perfectly fine. You can put epoxy pretty much over top damn near everything. But once you have a component that's made with epoxy, you're really kind of restricted to having to use epoxy for everything going forward that's going to be bonding onto that surface. So pop quiz, could I have used their 5-to-1 epoxy for doing this tabbing? Well, yeah, absolutely yes, because it's epoxy based. Now the main reason I should say one of the reasons I'm using their 2-to-1 here is, well, one, for the mixing ratios. 2-to-1, especially when you're looking at smaller quantities that you're mixing up, like pour mixing, the 2-to-1 is just an easier ratio for me to figure out. Now, someone probably smarter than me can easily do the math on a 5-to-1 in small batches, but for me, the 2-to-1 is just so much easier to keep track of and just so much easier to do in a hurry. Once this first layer of fiberglass is basically all wetted out and in place, now I'm going to be going over with a fin roller, and this is going to do a couple things for me. For one, the fillet that's beneath this fiberglass, it hasn't set up yet, so it's still malleable. So going over with the fin roller, it's going to help to establish a nice, even, consistent radius along that transition, but it's also going to work out some of the air bubbles. Now, I don't know what it is. There's just something satisfying about going over fresh glass with this roller. I mean, just watching the air pop out. I don't know. Maybe it's just too much time around the chemicals. But, I think it's kind of cool.
one layer down. Whoa, one more to go.
So it has been a little over 24 hours since all this epoxy was laid up, and as far as I can tell, everything's cured. I mean, it looks pretty good. Now, the one question that I have is that once I take off all this bracing, if it's still gonna maintain the correct shape, or if it's gonna, you know, if I'm gonna be getting some spring back once some of these backers and supports are removed. So, let's find out. Now this is the one that I'm going to be most curious to see what happens, because when I jam this piece in here, there's quite a bit of pressure from this pushing this forward. So I'm hoping that the tabbing is going to hold it in place. So let's find out. Oh, sweet! Awesome, awesome. Now, as you can see down here, I did have to put in some backing tape. Because there was a bit of a space between the bottom of this and where it actually came down on top of this rib. So had to just kind of throw in some, I don't know, 2-3 inch wide tape just so the epoxy didn't kind of, you know, come flowing out on the backside. So kind of curious to see how well it's going to release. Oh, a piece of cake. Yeah, nice and smooth. Actually, that came out so nice, I'm not going to have to do any filling, and you know, when it come time to actually tab the backside. I do still need to do that, and that's one of the things that's going to be coming up next. But I thought for sure I was going to have, you know, a little bit of, I guess, screwing around to do in order to get a nice little fillet there, but this looks good to me. Now, you know, kind of one of the nice things about using this 2-to-1 epoxy from Totalboat is that this particular type of epoxy, it's non-blushing, and what that means is that as it's curing, there is no amines floating to the surface of the epoxy. So, what that ultimately means is that typically, if there were, you'd have to come through with some water and you know, a little Scotch-Brite pad just to remove any of that blush that floated up to the surface. Well, because this is a non-blushing epoxy, I don't need to do that. Basically, I can just go right to the sanding, kind of scuff it up, clean it, and then I'm ready to start laying in some glass. So, you know, kind of a little bit of a time saver using the non-blushing epoxy, which less work the better, right? So there's still going to be a bit more glass work that needs to get done. Along the top here, I still need to get this kind of tabbed in, as well as I need to build up this actual, I guess, the main body of this insert a little bit more. Like I said, I wanted to get this closer to about, maybe not quite a 1/4 inch thick, but certainly thick enough where it can take a little bit of abuse. So right now there's only 2 layers of 1708, so I'll probably need to add probably four more, give or take. But for right now, I think this is going to be a good time to end this video, because this additional glasswork is going to take a little while, and I suspect this video is already getting a little long in the tooth. So, with that said, I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, please hit that thumbs up button. If you're not already subscribed, hit that subscribe button. I'd love to have you on board. If you have any questions, comments, you can leave those down below, and as always, thank you for your time, and thanks for watching.
This has been a Boatworks Today production.